The grand conference room buzzed with anticipation, the sleek glass walls reflecting the excitement in everyone's eyes. After 6 years of pouring my soul into Meridian Technologies, tonight was meant to be my night. 6 years of missed birthdays, canceled vacations, and endless late nights, all for this moment. I smoothed down my carefully chosen navy suit, the one I'd purchased specifically for the promotion I'd been promised for months. My boss, Theodore Montgomery, CEO of Meridian Technologies, had all but guaranteed the Director of Operations position would be mine. "Just a matter of time, David," he'd said, clapping me on the shoulder last quarter. But as I watched him approach the podium, champagne glass in hand, a flicker of something unfamiliar crossed his face. It wasn't until he spoke the words, "Know your place, David," that I understood my years of loyalty meant absolutely nothing. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." The Quarterly Leadership Summit was Meridian's most prestigious internal event. Executives flew in from regional offices, department heads prepared extensive presentations, and the entire headquarters staff gathered to celebrate our collective achievements. This quarter was special, record-breaking profits, a successful product launch I had personally overseen, and the retirement of our current Director of Operations, Harold Barnes. The summit room, as we called it, had been transformed for the evening. The standard conference tables had been replaced with elegant round tables draped in white linen. Crystal glasses caught the light from modern chandeliers, creating a constellation of sparkles across the ceiling. The company had spared no expense. Premium champagne, a gourmet catering service, and even a string quartet playing softly in the corner. I navigated through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with colleagues who had become friends over the years. My team was here in full force: Sarah from logistics, Raj from supply chain, Marcus from quality control, all of them raising their glasses as I passed, their eyes communicating what we all believed. Tonight was my night. "Ready for the big announcement?" whispered Elena, my assistant manager and closest ally at Meridian. Her dark eyes sparkled with excitement. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, working to keep my voice level despite the thrum of anticipation in my chest. I scanned the room and found Theodore in deep conversation with the board members. He caught my eye and nodded, that same reassuring nod he'd given me for months whenever the topic of succession came up. Next to him stood a man I didn't recognize, tall, confident, his tailored suit speaking of money and connections. "Who's that with Theodore?" I asked Elena. She followed my gaze. "That's James Harrington. Flew in from the London office last week. Some kind of strategic consultant, I think." I nodded, dismissing the slight unease that rippled through me. Consultants came and went at Meridian. They didn't change succession plans that had been years in the making. The gentle chime of a spoon against glass drew everyone's attention to the center of the room. Theodore stepped onto the small platform that had been set up for announcements, his commanding presence immediately silencing the buzz of conversation. "Welcome, everyone, to our Quarterly Leadership Summit," he began, his deep voice projecting effortlessly across the room. "Tonight, we not only celebrate another record-breaking quarter, but also a significant transition in our leadership team." My heart rate quickened. This was it. As many of you know, Harold Barnes, our esteemed Director of Operations, will be retiring at the end of this month after 15 remarkable years with Meridian Technologies. Applause erupted as Harold, a gentle giant of a man with silver hair and kind eyes, raised his glass in acknowledgement. "Harold's contribution to Meridian has been immeasurable," Theodore continued, "and filling his shoes will be no small task. It requires someone with vision, with innovative thinking, with the ability to take Meridian to heights we've only dreamed of." I straightened my shoulders almost imperceptibly, preparing myself for the moment my name would be called. Leadership. "Transitions are defining moments for any organization," Theodore said, his eyes scanning the room. "They require us to look not just at where we've been, but where we're going. Sometimes the right candidate isn't the obvious one. Sometimes we need fresh perspectives, new blood." A cold sensation washed over me, starting at the crown of my head and cascading down to my fingertips. This wasn't the introduction I'd been expecting. Which is why I'm thrilled to announce our new Director of Operations, James Harrington. The room erupted in applause as James stepped forward, his smile confident, his handshake with Theodore firm and familiar. I stood frozen, my champagne glass halfway to my lips, as the reality of what had just happened crashed over me like an icy wave. 6 years. 6 years of sacrifice, of innovative solutions, of building relationships with every department head and regional manager. 6 years of being the first to arrive and the last to leave. 6 years of assuming that loyalty and results would be rewarded, all for nothing. Elena's hand found my arm, her grip tight with shock. "David," she whispered, but there were no words to follow. What could she possibly say? I forced my features into a neutral expression as James began his acceptance speech. His British accent carried across the room, smooth and cultured, as he spoke about his excitement to join the Meridian family, as if he hadn't just been handed the position I had worked years to earn. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "And I look forward to working with all of you talented individuals," James was saying, "to build upon the strong foundation that's been established and take Meridian to new heights." More applause. I joined in mechanically, my palms barely making contact. "Of course," James continued, "I'll be relying heavily on the expertise of the existing team during this transition. I understand there are many of you who know this company, inside and out." His eyes found mine across the room, and I recognized the look. It was the diplomatic acknowledgement of a superior to someone who would now be reporting to them. My stomach churned. As James concluded his speech and stepped down from the platform, the crowd dispersed into congratulatory clusters. I remained where I was, my mind racing to process this blindside. Theodore approached, leading James directly to me. Of course, the introduction to the person who would now be training his own boss. "David," Theodore said, his tone carefully modulated to project casual authority, "I'd like you to meet James Harrington, our new Director of Operations." I extended my hand, years of professional conditioning overriding the tumult of emotions, threatening to break through. "Welcome to Meridian, James." "Pleasure to meet you, David," James replied, his grip firm. "I've heard remarkable things about your operational expertise. I hope we can work closely together." "Of course," I managed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Theodore placed a hand on my shoulder, the weight of it feeling more like restraint than camaraderie. "David has been with us for 6 years. He knows the operational side of Meridian better than anyone. You couldn't ask for a better right-hand man." "Right-hand man," After 6 years of leadership, of innovation, of sacrificing everything for this company, I had been relegated to right-hand man, to someone who had just walked through the door. James nodded appreciatively. Brilliant. Nothing more valuable than institutional knowledge. I'll be counting on you to help me get up to speed. I smiled, the muscles in my face straining with the effort. Looking forward to it. As they moved on to the next introduction, Elena reappeared at my side, her expression a mixture of outrage and concern. What just happened? She hissed under her breath. Apparently, I've been put in my place, I replied, my voice so low only she could hear it. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and hollow congratulations. I played my part, the good soldier accepting the change in command without complaint. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. As the event wound down, I found myself alone at the bar, nursing a scotch I had no intention of finishing. Theodore approached, his expression suggesting he was preparing to deliver a well-rehearsed explanation. "David," he began, settling onto the bar stool beside me. "I imagine you have questions." I turned to face him, keeping my expression neutral. Just one, actually. Why wasn't I even considered? Or if I was, why wasn't I informed that external candidates were being brought in? Theodore sighed, signaling the bartender for his usual gin and tonic. "It's not that simple, David. The board felt we needed someone with global experience. James has led operations for multinational corporations. He's worked in emerging markets. His perspective is different. Different from someone who has personally developed 3 of our most successful operational protocols. Different from someone who increased our efficiency by 34% last quarter." My voice remained steady, though it took considerable effort. "It's not a reflection on your performance," Theodore said, his tone shifting to one of slight impatience. "It's about what Meridian needs at this juncture. James brings connections, perspectives that we've been lacking." "Connections," I repeated, the word revealing what this was really about. Not merit, not results, politics. Theodore's expression hardened slightly. "This is business, David. Sometimes it's not just about who works the hardest. There are other considerations, strategic alignments, relationships that can open doors." "You could have told me," I said simply, "instead of letting me believe for months that I was next in line." Theodore took a long sip of his drink before responding. "Perhaps I should have. But I also thought you understood how these things work. Not everyone is destined for the executive suite, David. Some people are most valuable exactly where they are." The words hit like a physical blow. "Know your place, you mean?" His eyes narrowed briefly before his expression smoothed out. "I wouldn't have put it so bluntly, but yes, you're an exceptional operations manager. One of the best I've seen. But director level? That requires a different skill set." "A skill set like knowing the right people?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice now. Theodore's patience visibly thinned. "Careful, David. Disappointment is understandable, but bitterness is unbecoming. James is your superior now. I expect you to assist him with the same dedication you've shown all these years." With that, he stood, straightening his already impeccable suit. "Take the weekend to process this. I need you focused on Monday. We have the quarterly distribution review, and James will need to be brought up to speed." I watched him walk away, joining a group of board members who were preparing to leave. The casual ease with which he had dismissed my ambitions, my contributions, my worth to the company. It was breathtaking in its callousness. Elena found me still at the bar 20 minutes later. "You okay?" she asked, though the answer was obvious. "Peachy," I replied, pushing my untouched scotch away. "Just been told to know my place." Her eyes widened. "He didn't say that." Not in those exact words, but the message was clear. I'm valuable right where I am, doing the work while someone else gets the title, the pay, and the recognition. Elena's expression darkened. "That's absolute garbage. Everyone knows you deserve that position. James doesn't know the first thing about our operations. Apparently, he has global experience and strategic connections," I said, making air quotes. "Things I apparently lack." "So what are you going to do?" she asked, her voice lowering. It was the question I had been asking myself for the past 2 hours. What was I going to do? Accept the situation? Train James to do the job that should have been mine? Continue pouring my soul into a company that had made it clear I had reached my ceiling? "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But I do know I'm not sticking around to be anyone's right-hand man." The drive home that night was a blur of streetlights and racing thoughts. My apartment, a sleek one-bedroom I rarely saw except to sleep, felt particularly empty. I had sacrificed so much for Meridian. Relationships, hobbies, even basic work-life balance, all based on the understanding that it would eventually pay off. I moved to my home office, a small converted den with a view of the city skyline. Opening my laptop, I began drafting an email to Human Resources. Subject: Letter of Resignation. Please accept this letter as formal notification of my resignation from the position of Operations Manager at Meridian Technologies, effective immediately. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Was I really ready to walk away from 6 years of work? From the relationships I'd built? From the security of a job I knew inside and out? Then Theodore's words echoed in my mind. Know your place. My fingers began moving again, the words flowing now. While my time at Meridian has been professionally rewarding in many ways, recent events have made it clear that my career aspirations are not aligned with the opportunities available to me within the organization. I will be happy to assist in the transition of my responsibilities over the next 2 weeks if desired. Please consider this my formal 2 weeks' notice, though I am prepared to depart sooner if that would be preferable. Sincerely, David Mitchell. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then leaned back in my chair, a strange sense of lightness washing over me. For the first time in years, I felt free. Uncertain about the future, but free from the constraints of expectations that had shaped my professional identity for so long. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "How are you holding up?" I typed back, "Just resigned, effective immediately." Her response came seconds later. "What? Call me." Instead, I set my phone aside and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment. The city sprawled before me, lights twinkling against the night sky. Somewhere out there was my next chapter, one where my worth wouldn't be determined by someone else's assessment of my place. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email notification. I expected it to be an automatic response from HR, but instead, it was from a name I hadn't thought about in years. From Michael Jang. Subject: Time for a change. David, it's been a while. I've been following Meridian's success from afar and couldn't help but notice your fingerprints all over their operational innovations. That distribution model? Pure Mitchell magic. I'm reaching out because Nexus Innovations is expanding our technical operations division, and we need someone with vision to lead it. Someone who understands not just the mechanics of operations, but the strategy behind them. If you've ever thought about a change, I'd love to talk. No pressure, just possibilities. Michael Jung had been my mentor during my early career days. He had moved on to found Nexus Innovations, a smaller but rapidly growing tech company known for its innovative approaches and employee-centric culture. We had kept in loose contact over the years, occasionally exchanging industry insights or congratulations on notable achievements. The timing was uncanny, or perhaps not. Michael had always had an almost supernatural sense for opportunity. I stared at the email for a long moment, then drafted a reply. Michael, your timing is impeccable. As of about 10 minutes ago, I'm available for new opportunities. Would love to talk. David. As I hit send, my phone rang. Elena, undoubtedly calling. To talk me off what she perceived as a ledge. But I wasn't on a ledge. For the first time in years, I was standing on solid ground, no longer reaching for a ladder that had been pulled away. I answered the call. Before you say anything, I'm fine. Better than fine. You just quit without notice. Elena's voice was a mixture of awe and concern. After 6 years. Actually, I gave 2 weeks, but I doubt they'll want me to stay that long. I felt surprisingly calm as I said it. What happened after I left? Did Theodore say something else? I sighed, sinking into my couch. He told me to know my place, Elena. Not in those exact words, but the message was clear. I'm valuable to them as a workhorse, not as a leader. And I'm worth more than that. There was a pause on the other end. You are, she finally said. But what will you do now? I glanced at my laptop, Michael's email still open. I'm not sure yet, but I've got options. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm in control of my own career. After reassuring Elena that I wasn't having a breakdown and promising to call her over the weekend, I ended the call and returned to the window. The city looked different now, not just a backdrop to my career at Meridian, but a landscape of possibilities. My phone buzzed again. Another email from Michael. How's tomorrow for coffee? 10 a.m. at Lumina Cafe? Let's talk about your future. I smiled and typed, a quick response. I'll be there. That night I slept better than I had in months, perhaps years. The weight of unmet expectations had been lifted, replaced by the uncertain but exhilarating promise of new beginnings. The next morning, I woke to an email from HR acknowledging my resignation and requesting that I return company property and complete an exit interview. There was no mention of serving out my 2 weeks' notice. Apparently, Theodore had decided my departure should be immediate. Fine by me. A separate email from Theodore himself was brief and coldly professional. David, HR has informed me of your resignation. While the timing is unfortunate given our upcoming quarterly review, I respect your decision. Please coordinate with Elena regarding the transition of your current projects. Meridian Technologies appreciates your 6 years of service. Theodore Montgomery, CEO, Meridian Technologies. No mention of our conversation. No acknowledgement of his role in my departure. Just corporate platitudes wrapped in the thinnest veneer of professionalism. I closed the email without replying and began preparing for my meeting with Michael. As I selected a suit, charcoal gray, not Meridian navy, I felt a surge of anticipation. For 6 years, my identity had been tied to Meridian Technologies. Today, I would begin the process of redefining who I was professionally, on my own terms. Lumina Cafe was a sleek, minimalist space favored by the tech industry's elite. I arrived early, securing a quiet corner table with a view of the entrance. Michael arrived precisely at 10, his signature energy preceding him as he scanned the cafe and spotted me with a broad smile. "David Mitchell," he said, extending his hand. Looking sharp for a man who just walked away from 6 years of corporate servitude. I laughed, the sound surprising me with its genuineness. "Feels strange," I admitted, "but right." Michael settled into the chair across from me, signaling for coffee. "I heard through the grapevine about what happened at Meridian, the Harrington appointment." I raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast." "It's a small world at the top," Michael replied with a shrug. "And operations directors for tech companies aren't exactly a dime a dozen. When someone with James Harrington's connections lands at Meridian while their homegrown talent is overlooked, people notice." The barista delivered our coffees, giving me a moment to consider my response. It was made clear to me that I should know my place, I finally said, the words still bitter on my tongue. Michael's expression darkened momentarily. Theodore always did value politics over performance. His loss. He took a sip of his coffee. And potentially our gain at Nexus. "So this isn't just a sympathy coffee?" I asked, allowing a small smile. "Hardly," Michael laughed. "I've been watching your work for years, David. That inventory prediction algorithm you developed? The cross-departmental efficiency protocol? That's the kind of innovative thinking we need at Nexus." He leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "We're scaling rapidly. Our operations need someone who can build systems that grow with us, not just manage what exists. Someone who sees operations as a strategic function, not just a logistical one." "That's always been my approach," I said. "Operations should drive strategy, not just support it." "Exactly," Michael nodded emphatically. "Which is why I want you to consider joining us as Chief Operations Officer." I nearly choked on my coffee. "KOO? Michael, I was just an operations manager at Meridian." Michael waved this away dismissively. "Titles are just labels, David. I know what you built at Meridian. I know the value you created while Theodore and his board took the credit. At Nexus, we recognize talent and empower it." He pulled out a sleek folder and slid it across the table. "This is what we're thinking. Salary, equity, team structure. Take a few days to look it over." I opened the folder, my eyes widening at the figure on the first page. It was nearly double my salary at Meridian, plus significant equity in a rapidly growing company. "This is generous," I managed. Michael smiled. "It's commensurate with the value you'll bring. And it's just the starting point. At Nexus, growth isn't capped by arbitrary hierarchies or who you know." As we continued our conversation, Michael outlined his vision for Nexus, a company that would disrupt traditional tech models by prioritizing operational excellence as a competitive advantage. He spoke of building systems that could scale exponentially, of integrating emerging technologies like AI and blockchain into operational frameworks. It was everything I had tried to advocate for at Meridian, only to be told such innovations were not aligned with our current strategic direction. By the time we finished our coffee, I had a clear picture of not just the role but the possibilities it represented. This wasn't just a job offer. It was an opportunity to prove what I had known all along, that I was capable of far more than Meridian had allowed me to demonstrate. I don't need days to consider, I told Michael as we stood to leave. I'm in. His smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that. How soon can you start? How's Monday? I replied. As we shook hands to seal the agreement, I felt something shift inside me. The last vestiges of bitterness regarding Meridian giving way to excitement about what lay ahead. Theodore had told me to know my place, never imagining that my place might be far beyond the limitations he had imposed. Walking out of Lumina Cafe, I pulled out my phone and saw 3 missed calls from Elena. I texted her quickly, just accepted a position as COO at Nexus Innovations. Tell you all about it over dinner tonight? Her response was immediate. What? Yes. 7 p.m. at Vespa? I smiled, pocketing my phone and lifting my face to the sun. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, on the threshold of becoming who I was meant to be all along. Monday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. The weekend had been a whirlwind of emotions, conversations, and decisions, but now, as I approached the gleaming Meridian Technologies headquarters, my path was set. The familiar security guard nodded as I swiped my badge for what would be the last time. The weight of that finality wasn't lost on me, but rather than feeling burdened by it, I felt liberated. The early morning office was quiet. Most employees wouldn't arrive for another hour. I preferred it this way. My desk was impeccably organized, as always, making the packing process efficient. 6 years of professional life condensed into a single cardboard box. A few awards, family photos, my collection of fountain pens, and the small jade plant Elena had given me 3 years ago that had somehow survived despite my erratic work schedule. I didn't actually think you'd go through with it, came a voice from behind me. I turned to find Elena leaning against the doorway of my office, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of admiration and concern. That makes 2 of us, I admitted, carefully wrapping my custom coffee mug in newspaper. But here we are. She moved into the office, closing the door behind her. I still can't believe you're going to be a C-level executive, COO of Nexus Innovations. That's a big deal, David. It is, I agreed, the reality of it still sinking in even after my lengthy dinner conversation with Elena on Friday, where I'd shared every detail of my meeting with Michael. But more than the title, it's the opportunity. Michael is building something special at Nexus, something that aligns with everything I believe about what operations should be. Elena nodded, perching on the edge of my desk. And the salary? Bump doesn't hurt either, she added with a small smile, referencing the substantial increase Michael had offered. The money is nice, I conceded, but it's secondary. What matters is being valued for what I bring to the table, not being told to know my place. Elena's expression darkened at the reminder of Theodore's condescension. Have you seen him yet? She asked, her voice lowering even though we were alone. Or James? Not yet, I replied, glancing at my watch. Theodore usually arrives around 8:30. James, I don't know, but HR is expecting me at 9 for the exit interview. You think Theodore will try to keep you? Elena asked. I laughed, the sound surprisingly light. He might try, but it's too late. The decision is made. As if summoned by our conversation, a notification pinged on my computer, an email from Theodore. David, please see me in my office at 8:45 a.m. before your HR appointment. Theodore. Elena read the message over my shoulder and raised an eyebrow. Speak of the devil. Indeed, I murmured, closing the email without replying. Looks like I'll be getting the obligatory retention attempt after all. What will you say to him? Elena asked, curiosity evident in her voice. I placed the last of my personal items in the box and straightened my tie. The truth, that he showed me exactly who I am to this company, and it's not someone I want to be anymore. The next hour passed quickly as I finalized handover documents for my team and sent my last official emails as operations manager of Meridian Technologies. At precisely 8:45, I stood outside Theodore's office, my resignation letter in one hand, a detailed transition plan in the other. His assistant, Meredith, a formidable woman who had been with Theodore for over a decade, gave me a tight smile. He's expecting you, she said, pressing the intercom. David's here, sir. Send him in, came Theodore's clipped response as I entered his corner office with its sweeping city views. I was struck by how small Theodore looked behind his massive mahogany desk. Had he always seemed so diminutive, or was this a perspective shift born from my newfound liberation? David, he greeted, not rising from his chair. Please sit. I did, placing my documents on the edge of his desk. You wanted to see me. Theodore leaned back, steepling his fingers, his negotiation posture. I'd seen it countless times in meetings with clients and partners. I've had some time to reflect on our conversation Friday night, he began, and I believe there may have been some miscommunication. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing, allowing the silence to stretch between us. Your contributions to Meridian have been valuable, he continued, clearly uncomfortable with my lack of response. Perhaps more valuable than I adequately expressed. The board and I have discussed your resignation, and we believe it would be a significant loss to the company. I appreciate the acknowledgement, I said evenly, but I've accepted a position elsewhere. Theodore's expression tightened. So quickly? That seems rather impulsive, David. I'd expect more careful consideration from someone at your level. The condescension in his tone was unmistakable and remarkably tone-deaf given the circumstances. It wasn't impulsive at all, I replied. The opportunity has been available for some time. I simply hadn't pursued it because of my commitment to Meridian, a commitment I believed was reciprocated. Business decisions aren't personal, David, Theodore said, leaning forward. The choice to bring in James was strategic. It doesn't diminish your value to the company, doesn't it? I asked quietly. You told me quite clearly that I should know my place, that I wasn't executive material. That seems quite personal from where I'm sitting. Theodore's jaw tightened. I never used those exact words. You didn't have to, I replied. The message was clear enough in your actions and implications. He sighed, shifting tactics. What would it take to keep you here? A title adjustment? A compensation review? Your own team? I almost laughed at the transparency of his concern. Not for me, but for the operational chaos my departure would undoubtedly create. Nothing, I said simply. You had 6 years to recognize my value, Theodore. You chose not to until I had one foot out the door. That tells me everything I need to know about how Meridian sees my worth. This is business, not a relationship, he countered, irritation creeping into his voice. We don't need to constantly affirm your value for it to exist. Actually, I said, standing up, in business as in relationships, actions speak louder than words. Your actions made it clear that loyalty and results aren't enough at Meridian, and that's not an environment I choose to remain in. Theodore's expression hardened. Where are you going? Which competitor poached you? I haven't been poached. I corrected him. I've accepted a position as Chief Operations Officer at Nexus Innovations. The color drained from Theodore's face. Michael Zhang's company? I nodded, suppressing a smile at his reaction. Starting today. Nexus is barely on the map, Theodore scoffed, though his discomfort was evident. They're a fraction of our size. For now, I agreed, but they're growing rapidly, with a clear vision and a commitment to valuing talent. Size isn't everything, Theodore. His eyes narrowed. You signed a non-compete agreement, David. Our legal team will... My non-compete specifically applies to direct competitors in enterprise software solutions, I interrupted smoothly. Nexus operates in an adjacent but distinct market segment, focusing on integration platforms rather than standalone software solutions. Your legal team is welcome to review, but they'll find the same conclusion Nexus's team did. There's no violation. Theodore's face flushed, his composure slipping further. You've clearly thought this through. I have, I confirmed. Just as I've prepared a comprehensive transition plan for my team, I added, pushing the document toward him. I believe in leaving things better than I found them. For a moment, I thought Theodore might actually appreciate the gesture, but his next words dispelled that notion. This is a mistake, David. You're throwing away 6 years of building your reputation at Meridian for a gamble on an unproven company? I smiled, genuinely this time. No, Theodore. The mistake would be staying in a place where I'm not valued simply because it's familiar. Thank you for making the choice so clear. I turned to leave, but Theodore's voice stopped me at the door. When this falls apart, and it will, these startups always do, don't expect your position here to be waiting for you. I paused, then turned back to face him one last time. I would never expect that, Theodore, but I suspect it's Meridian that should be worried about the things falling apart. With that, I walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. Meredith avoided my gaze as I passed her desk, but I noticed her small nod of approval. Interesting. The HR exit interview was procedural and brief. Signing forms, returning company property, confirming my final paycheck would include accrued vacation time. The HR director, a woman named Patricia, whom I'd always found fair-minded, hesitated as we concluded. Off the record, she said, lowering her voice. This is a significant loss for Meridian. I want you to know that. I appreciate that, Patricia, I replied, gathering my belongings. The director of operations position, she continued, glancing toward the door to ensure we weren't overheard. There was strong internal support for your candidacy. The decision to bring in James came directly from Theodore and 2 board members, with connections to his previous company. Not everyone agreed. This confirmation of what I'd suspected should have been vindicating, but instead, it just reinforced that I was making the right decision. Thank you for telling me, I said. But honestly, it makes this easier. I'd rather be somewhere where merit matters more than connections. Patricia nodded, standing to shake my hand. Best of luck, David. Nexus is fortunate to have you. As I navigated the familiar hallways of Meridian for the final time, I passed James's new office, my almost office, and saw him inside arranging his belongings. He looked up as I passed, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. David, he called, stepping to the doorway. Got a minute? I paused, curious despite myself. Just one. I'm on my way out. James approached, his expression surprisingly genuine. I heard you're leaving. I wanted to say that wasn't my intention, to push you out. You didn't push me out, James, I replied candidly. Theodore did, by making it clear my contributions would always be undervalued here. It's not personal toward you. James nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I've reviewed some of your operational protocols over the weekend. They're brilliant, particularly the predictive inventory system. Thank you, I said, meaning it. They'll serve Meridian well. The documentation is thorough. If I could pick your brain sometime, he began. I'm afraid that won't be possible, I interrupted, not unkindly. I'm starting a new position. Today. Ah, James looked genuinely disappointed. Of course. Well, best of luck to you, David. And to you, I replied, continuing toward the elevator. As the doors slid closed on Meridian Technologies, I felt a momentary pang, not of regret, but of acknowledgement. 6 years of my professional life had been invested here. I had grown here, built things here, believed in the company's mission. But sometimes, growth requires leaving familiar ground. Sometimes the only way to truly find your place is to leave the place others have designated for you. The morning sunlight felt different as I emerged from the Meridian building for the last time, brighter somehow, more alive with possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Your office is ready. Team is excited to meet you. Welcome aboard, COO Mitchell. I smiled, hailing a cab to take me across the city to Nexus Innovations. As the Meridian building receded in the rearview mirror, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Theodore had told me to know my place. Little did he realize he was giving me the push I needed to find exactly where I belonged. Nexus Innovations occupied 3 floors of a renovated industrial building in the city's emerging tech district. Unlike Meridian's sterile corporate gleam, Nexus embraced the building's original character: exposed brick walls, refurbished wooden beams, and floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with natural light. Michael was waiting in the lobby, his characteristic energy evident in the way he bounded forward to greet me. The man of the hour, he exclaimed, clasping my hand in both of his. How does freedom feel? Surreal, I admitted, taking in the vibrant atmosphere around us. People, moving purposefully between spaces, gathered in small collaborative groups, energy palpable in the air. But right. That feeling never goes away, Michael said with a knowing smile. I felt it every day for the first year after leaving CyberEdge. Come on, let me show you around before the welcome meeting. The tour was comprehensive but efficient. Michael had always known how to convey maximum information in minimum time. The 3 floors were organized logically: engineering and product development on the top floor, operations and customer success in the middle, sales and marketing on the ground level. Workspaces were open but thoughtfully designed, with plenty of breakout rooms for focused work or private conversations. And this, Michael said finally, stopping before a corner office with glass walls and a view of the city, is you. The office was spacious yet unpretentious, furnished with a sleek desk, comfortable chairs, and a small conference table. A welcome basket sat on the desk, alongside the latest model laptop and a handwritten card. I know you're not big on ceremony, Michael said, leaning against the doorframe, but the team wanted to make sure you felt welcome. Speaking of which, they're waiting in the main conference room whenever you're ready. I placed my box of personal items on the desk, immediately noticing how much lighter it seemed in this space than it had at Meridian. Lead the way. The welcome meeting, turned out to be a carefully orchestrated introduction to the company's operational framework, current challenges, and the team I would be leading. Michael had clearly briefed everyone on my background and expertise, allowing the conversation to progress beyond pleasantries to substantive discussion remarkably quickly. The operations team was smaller than Meridian's, but impressively capable. It's a mix of industry veterans and innovative newcomers, all clearly selected for their aptitude rather than their connections. What struck me most was how freely they shared both successes and challenges, without the political maneuvering that had become standard at Meridian. "Our biggest growing pain right now is scale," explained Sophia, the current head of supply chain who would be reporting to me. "We've tripled our client base in 18 months, and our systems aren't keeping pace. Especially around inventory prediction," added Marco, the logistics manager. "We're either overstocked or scrambling to fulfill orders. There's got to be a better way." I suppressed a smile, recalling the inventory prediction algorithm I'd developed at Meridian, the one James had just complimented me on. "Wanted to let you know the quarterly distribution review was a disaster today. No one seems to understand the integration points between systems. Theodore is furious. If you're willing, I'd value your insights off the record. No obligation to Meridian, just professional courtesy." I stared at the message, a mix of emotions washing over me. Vindication, concern for my former team, even a touch of sympathy for James, who had been dropped into a complex system with no true onboarding. After careful consideration, I typed a response. "James, I appreciate the outreach. I've documented everything thoroughly, including integration points. Check the shared operations drive, folder labeled System Architecture, Master Reference. If you have specific questions after reviewing, let me know." I hesitated before adding a final line. For what it's worth, Theodore's refusal to invest in cross-training is a significant vulnerability in Meridian's operational structure. Good luck. As I pressed send and stepped into the elevator, I realized something profound. I no longer felt bitter about being passed over. Instead, I felt grateful. Theodore telling me to know my place hadn't diminished me. It had liberated me to find where I truly belonged. The elevator doors opened to the lobby where Elena was waiting, her expression both nervous and excited about her own impending transition. "Ready for a new chapter?" I asked as we walked out into the evening air. "More than ready," she replied, with conviction. Sometimes you need to leave a place to find your true place. As we walked toward the parking garage, I glanced back at the Nexus building, the lights of my new office still visible from the street. Theodore had been right. About one thing. I did need to know my place. He just hadn't realized that my place was far bigger than the box he'd tried to keep me in. 3 months into my role as COO of Nexus Innovations, the transformation was remarkable, not just for the company, but for me personally. The daily grind of endless meetings, political maneuvering, and constant justification that had defined my existence at Meridian had been replaced by something I had almost forgotten. Purpose-driven work that ignited my passion and leveraged my strengths. The morning sun streamed through the windows of my corner office as I reviewed our quarterly projections. In just 90 days, we had implemented the inventory prediction algorithm I had developed at Meridian, now significantly enhanced, restructured our logistics operations with Elena at the helm, and onboarded 7 new enterprise clients, 3 of whom had specifically cited our operational excellence as the deciding factor. A knock at my open door drew my attention. Michael stood there, coffee mug in hand, his trademark energy evident in his stance. "Have you seen the industry reports?" he asked without preamble, crossing to set a tablet on my desk. I shook my head, reaching for the device. Just got in? What am I looking at? Michael's grin widened as he pointed to a graph on the screen. This is Forrester's latest analysis of integration platform providers. Look at our trajectory. The data was unmistakable. Nexus had jumped 4 positions in the rankings, now sitting just outside the top 5 in our sector. More tellingly, our operational efficiency rating had skyrocketed, putting us at number 2 industry-wide. This is phenomenal, I said, scanning the detailed breakdowns. Operations outperforming companies 3 times our size. That's what happens when you put the right person in the right role, Michael replied, settling into the chair across from me. Which reminds me, the board wants to move up your 6-month review. I glanced up, a flicker of my old corporate wariness surfacing briefly. Any particular reason? Michael laughed, understanding the reflex. Only good ones, I promise. They're impressed, David. We all are. 3 months ago, we were a promising startup with operational growing pains that threatened to limit our expansion. Now we're outperforming established players. He leaned forward, his expression turning serious. You've built something remarkable here already. The team structure, the cross-functional integration, the predictive systems, they're not just improvements, they're innovations. It's been a collaborative effort, I said, uncomfortable with taking full credit despite the pride I felt in what we'd accomplished. Of course it has, Michael agreed readily. That's part of your success. You build teams, not just systems. But make no mistake, you've been the catalyst. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a notification, an email from an address. I immediately recognized Theodore Montgomery's executive assistant. Speak of the devil, I murmured, turning the phone so Michael could see the sender. Theodore reaching out? Michael asked, his interest piqued. That should be interesting. I opened the email with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Subject, request for meeting. David, Mr. Montgomery would like to schedule a brief meeting with you at your earliest convenience. He proposes lunch this Thursday at Elysian Restaurant, 1 p.m. Please advise if this would be suitable. Regards, Meredith Chen, Executive Assistant to Theodore Montgomery, CEO, Meridian Technologies. 3 months without a word, and now he wants lunch, I remarked, showing Michael the full message. Michael's eyebrows rose. You going to take it? I considered the question seriously. My initial impulse was to decline, to savor the clean break I had made and maintain the forward momentum we had established at Nexus. But professional curiosity won out. I think I will, I decided. At the very least, it should be enlightening. Michael nodded slowly. Just remember who you are now, David. You're not his subordinate anymore. You're a peer, arguably, given our recent growth, a rising star he needs to reckon with. His words resonated with me, a reminder of how fundamentally my professional identity had transformed. At Meridian, I had been perpetually seeking validation, striving to prove my worth to gatekeepers who had already decided my place in their hierarchy. At Nexus, my worth was assumed, and my role was to leverage that value to create something meaningful. I'll remember, I assured him, typing a brief response to Meredith confirming the appointment. Michael stood to leave, then paused at the door. The executive team is having dinner tonight at Terroir to celebrate the Forrester rankings. 7 o'clock. Bring Elena. Her logistics restructuring was a big part of this win. After he left, I turned back to the quarterly projections with renewed focus. The numbers told a story beyond just financial performance. They represented what was possible when talent was recognized and empowered rather than constrained by arbitrary limitations. My intercom buzzed, Elena's voice coming through. "Your 9:30 is here. The team from Vertex Solutions." "Send them in," I replied, standing to greet the potential new client. The Vertex meeting was productive. Their leadership team clearly impressed by our operational framework and growth trajectory. As they left, their CEO lingered behind. "I have to say, Mr. Mitchell, your reputation precedes you," she said, extending her hand. "Your work on predictive inventory systems is becoming something of a legend in operations circles." I blinked in surprise. I wasn't aware the word had spread that far. She smiled knowingly. "Innovation speaks for itself. We were close to signing with Meridian 6 months ago, but their operations seem to be in disarray lately. When we heard you had moved to Nexus, it definitely influenced our decision to explore alternatives." After she left, I sat at my desk, processing this unexpected information. I had been so focused on building something new at Nexus that I hadn't spent much time thinking about what might be happening at Meridian. The idea that my departure had created ripples beyond my immediate team was surprising, and, I had to admit, gratifying. The rest of the day passed in a productive blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and problem-solving. One of the aspects of Nexus that I valued most was the absence of artificial barriers between departments. Ideas flowed freely, with engineers, marketers, and operations specialists collaborating without the territorial disputes that had been endemic at Meridian. By the time I joined the executive team at Terroir that evening, I was riding the high of a day filled with meaningful progress. The restaurant, an upscale establishment known for its farm-to-table cuisine and extensive wine list, hummed with energy as we gathered in a private dining room. Elena arrived shortly after I did, her confidence having grown exponentially since joining Nexus. She had thrived in the more meritocratic environment, her logistical genius finally receiving the recognition it deserved. "To Nexus," Michael toasted once everyone had arrived, "and to the incredible team that's putting us on the map." As glasses clinked and conversation flowed, I found myself engaged in a discussion with our Chief Technology Officer, Arjun, about integrating machine learning into our inventory systems. "The predictive model you built is already impressive," Arjun was saying, "but if we layer in adaptive learning capabilities, we could potentially anticipate market shifts before they happen." "I've been thinking along similar lines," I agreed, excitement building as we explored the possibilities. "What if we—" My phone buzzed with an incoming call, the screen displaying a name that immediately caught my attention. James Harrington, Meridian's Director of Operations. The position that should have been mine. "Excuse me," I said to Arjun. "I should take this." Stepping into the restaurant's quiet foyer, I answered the call with measured professionalism. "James, this is unexpected." "David," James's voice carried a note of stress I hadn't heard before. "I apologize for calling after hours. I wouldn't if it weren't important." "What can I do for you?" I asked, curiosity overcoming any lingering resentment. There was a pause before James continued. "I'll be direct. We're facing a significant operational crisis at Meridian. The quarterly distribution has gone sideways. 3 major clients are threatening to pull out because of fulfillment delays." I leaned against the wall, processing this information. "That sounds serious, but I'm not sure how I can help. I'm no longer with Meridian." "I know," James acknowledged. a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. But you built these systems. No one understands them like you do. Your documentation is comprehensive, but there are nuances, connections between systems that aren't fully captured. I need your insights. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had been brought in to replace me was now asking for my help. 3 months ago, Theodore had told me to know my place. Now Meridian was experiencing the consequences of undervaluing the very expertise they had dismissed. I understand your position, James, I said carefully, but I have commitments to Nexus now. My primary responsibility is here. I respect that, James replied quickly. I'm not asking for anything that would compromise your current role. Just consultation, off the books if necessary. I can compensate you personally for your time. His desperation was evident, and despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy. James hadn't created this situation. Theodore had, by prioritizing connections over competence, politics over performance. Let me think about it, I finally said. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Returning to the celebration dinner, I found my mind divided between the vibrant future we were building at Nexus and the unraveling situation at Meridian. There was a certain vindication in knowing that my departure had exposed the structural weaknesses I had long tried to address, but no satisfaction in seeing former colleagues suffering the consequences. Elena noticed my distraction as the evening wound down. Everything okay? She asked as we waited for our cars outside the restaurant. I shared the highlights of James's call, watching her expression shift from surprise to a kind of grim validation. Are you going to help them? She asked, wrapping her coat tighter against the evening chill. I'm not sure, I admitted. Part of me thinks they made their bed, let them lie in it. But another part feels responsible for the systems you created, Elena finished for me. Even if they didn't value the creator. I nodded, her insight cutting to the heart of my dilemma. Exactly. Plus, there are good people at Meridian who don't deserve to suffer because of Theodore's poor decisions. Elena considered this, then offered a perspective I hadn't fully formed. Maybe there's a middle path. You could provide limited consultation, enough to help them stabilize, while maintaining clear boundaries. It would demonstrate your professional integrity, while also making it abundantly clear what Meridian lost when they told you to know your place. As my car arrived, I found myself appreciating once again the clarity Elena brought to complex situations. I'll sleep on it, I promised, but I think you might be right. The next morning, I arrived at Nexus earlier than usual, my decision made after a night of reflection. I would offer James limited consultation, not out of obligation, to Meridian, but out of respect for the systems I had built and the people who now depended on them. I called James from my office, laying out clear parameters. 3 consultation sessions, strictly focused on systems integration, with a formal agreement that my involvement would remain confidential and would not interfere with my Nexus responsibilities. Thank you, James said, relief evident in his voice. This is more than generous, given the circumstances. Just to be clear, I added, I'm doing this as an independent consultant, not as a representative of Nexus. And my help is for the team and the systems, not for Theodore. Understood completely, James assured me. For what it's worth, things between Theodore and me have become strained. His management approach is not what I expected when I accepted this position. That revelation was interesting, but not entirely surprising. Theodore had always been skilled at presenting one face during recruitment, and another once people were under his authority. The rest of the week passed in a productive rhythm, with my Nexus responsibilities taking priority, while I prepared for both my consultation with James and my upcoming lunch with Theodore. Two conversations that represented the past I had left behind and the future I was building. Thursday arrived, and at precisely 1 p.m., I walked into Elysian Restaurant, a high-end establishment favored by corporate executives for its private alcoves and discreet service. Theodore was already seated at a corner table, his attention focused on his phone. As I approached, I noticed subtle changes in his appearance. A slight tension around his eyes, a tightness in his posture that hadn't been there 3 months ago. The confidence that had once bordered on arrogance seemed diminished somehow. He stood as I reached the table, extending his hand. "David, thank you for coming." "Theodore," I replied, shaking his hand firmly before taking my seat. "It's been a while." He signaled for the waiter, ordering his usual scotch before turning to me. "What can I get you?" "Sparkling water with lime," I replied, noting his raised eyebrow at my deviation from the glass of wine I would have typically ordered during business lunches at Meridian. "Not drinking these days?" he asked as the waiter departed. "Not during business hours," I clarified. "My afternoon schedule is full." He nodded, a flicker of respect crossing his features. "Michael runs a tight ship, I hear." "Michael creates an environment where people hold themselves accountable," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." Theodore acknowledged this with a slight inclination of his head. "Fair enough. And how is life at Nexus treating you?" "Exceptionally well," I said, keeping my tone neutral despite the pride I felt. "It's been an invigorating change." "So I've heard," Theodore replied, his casual tone not quite masking his interest. "Your operational restructuring has generated quite a buzz in the industry." Our drinks arrived, creating a natural pause in the conversation. I took a sip of my water, waiting for Theodore to reveal the true purpose of this meeting. "I won't waste your time with small talk, David," he finally said, leaning forward slightly. "Meridian has experienced some challenges since your departure." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied diplomatically. His expression suggested he didn't entirely believe my sympathy. "James is competent in many ways, but he's struggled to fully grasp the integrated systems you developed. The quarterly distribution issues have created significant fallout." I remained silent, neither confirming my awareness of these issues nor offering immediate assistance. "The board is concerned," Theodore continued, his discomfort becoming more evident. "We've lost 2 significant clients already, and 3 more are wavering." "That sounds serious," I observed neutrally. Theodore's patience visibly thinned. "You know it's serious, David. James called you." "So he knew about that. Interesting." "James reached out as a professional courtesy," I acknowledged. "I've agreed to provide limited consultation to help stabilize the systems." Relief flashed across Theodore's face, quickly replaced by a more measured expression. "That's appreciated. But I believe we need a more comprehensive solution." The waiter returned to take our lunch order. I selected the grilled salmon, while Theodore opted for steak, rare as always. The momentary interruption gave me time to consider what might be coming next. Once we were alone again, Theodore cut to the chase. "I'd like you to consider returning to Meridian, David." Despite having anticipated this possibility, hearing it stated so directly was still surprising. "In what capacity?" I asked, my voice deliberately even. "Director of Global Operations," he replied without hesitation. It would be a newly created position, above James's current role. You'd have full strategic oversight of all operational functions, reporting directly to me. I took a slow sip of my water, processing the offer. 3 months ago, this would have been everything I wanted. The recognition, the authority, the validation of my expertise. Now, it felt like too little, too late. That's a generous offer, I said carefully. But I'm committed to Nexus. We're building something special there. Theodore's expression hardened slightly. Nexus is what? 1/10. Our size? 1/15? I'm offering you global reach, substantial resources, and a compensation package that would significantly exceed whatever Michael can afford. It's not about size or money, Theodore, I replied, maintaining my composure. It's about values. Alignment. At Nexus, my contributions are recognized and valued from day one, not just when crisis strikes. Our food arrived, providing another natural break in the increasingly tense conversation. We ate in silence for a few minutes before Theodore tried a different approach. I understand you might harbor some resentment about how things unfolded, he said, his tone softening into something that might have been genuine reflection. Perhaps I didn't handle the director selection process as well as I could have. Perhaps, I agreed mildly. He set down his fork, meeting my gaze directly. I'm acknowledging that mistake, David. The board and I have recognized that you were the right choice all along. This new position is an opportunity to correct that error in judgment. The sincere admission nearly threw me. Theodore Montgomery rarely acknowledged mistakes. But the timing was telling. The acknowledgement came only after Meridian had felt the impact of my absence, only after their operational stability had begun to crumble, only after clients had started to leave. I appreciate your candor, I said, and the recognition. But the truth is, Theodore, I'm not interested in returning to Meridian under any circumstances. His expression darkened. That seems rather definitive for someone who devoted 6 years to the company. It is definitive, I confirmed. Those 6 years taught me valuable lessons about operations, about leadership, and about my own worth. The last lesson came when you told me to know my place. As it turns out, my place wasn't at Meridian after all. Theodore's jaw tightened. One comment made in a moment of frustration. It wasn't just a comment, I interrupted gently. It was a revelation of how you fundamentally view talent and contribution. You didn't value what I brought to Meridian until it was gone. That says everything about your leadership approach. He sat back, a flash of anger crossing his features before he regained control. This isn't personal, David. It's business. Meridian needs your expertise. And that's exactly why I can't return, I replied evenly. Because to you, I'm just a resource, a solution to a problem. At Nexus, I'm a partner in building something meaningful. The remainder of lunch passed in strained conversation about industry trends and mutual acquaintances. As we prepared to leave, Theodore made one final attempt. The offer remains open, he said, signing the check. When the shine wears off at Nexus, and it will, these startups always hit a ceiling, remember that Meridian is ready to welcome you back to a position worthy of your talents. I smiled, genuinely this time. Thank you, Theodore, but I won't be coming back. Nexus isn't just a stepping stone for me, it's where I'm building my future. As we parted ways outside the restaurant, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. The conversation had confirmed what I already knew. Leaving Meridian had been the right decision. not just for my career, but for my sense of professional identity and worth. Walking back to the Nexus offices, I called Elena to give her a brief update on the lunch meeting. "So he offered you a director-level position?" she asked, unable to hide her amazement. "After telling you to know your place 3 months ago?" "Global director," I clarified with a small laugh. "Apparently, my place has been significantly upgraded in his estimation." "Funny how that works," Elena remarked dryly. "What did you tell him?" "That I'm exactly where I belong," I replied, feeling the truth of those words deep in my bones. Later that afternoon, I met with James as promised, walking him through the integration points of the operational systems I had designed. Despite the circumstances of our professional relationship, I found him to be genuinely committed to understanding the frameworks rather than just implementing quick fixes. "I have to ask," James said as our session wound down. "Did Theodore approach you about returning to Meridian?" The directness of the question surprised me. "He did," I acknowledged. "How did you know?" James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because we had a board meeting yesterday where he proposed creating a new global director position. He didn't mention your name specifically, but it was clear who he had in mind." "And how do you feel about that?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. "Honestly?" James met my gaze directly. "Relieved? I was brought in under false pretenses, David. Theodore portrayed the operations department as well-structured and functioning smoothly, just needing some global perspective. What I found instead was a brilliant but intricate system that only you fully understood, with no proper succession planning or knowledge transfer." His candor was unexpected but refreshing. "That sounds like Theodore," I admitted. "He's always been more concerned with appearances than fundamentals." "I've noticed," James said dryly. "For what it's worth, I understand now why the team was so loyal to you. What you built here was remarkable." As our consultation concluded, James extended his hand. "Thank you for doing this, despite having every reason not to. It speaks volumes about your character." I shook his hand, feeling a surprising sense of professional camaraderie. "We're all just trying to do good work, James. The politics, the titles, that's all secondary." "I'm learning that," he replied with a rueful smile. 3 months in. Theodore's organization has been quite the education. Back at Nexus, I found Michael waiting in my office, his expression curious. "How was lunch with the former boss?" he asked as I settled behind my desk. I gave him the highlights, including Theodore's attempt to recruit me back to Meridian. Michael's laughter echoed through the office when I described the global director offer. 3 months ago, he couldn't see your value clearly enough to promote you to a regular director position, Michael marveled. Now he's creating a global role just to get you back. If that's not validation of your worth, I don't know what is. It's validation of their desperation, I corrected him. Theodore doesn't suddenly value my contribution more. He just feels the pain of its absence. Michael nodded thoughtfully. There's a leadership lesson in that. Recognizing talent before it walks out the door is a lot more effective than trying to recapture it after the fact. As Michael left, my phone pinged with a notification, an industry news alert about Meridian Technologies. The headline made me pause. Meridian stocks dip following client departures. Operational concerns cited. I set the phone aside, feeling no pleasure in Meridian's struggles despite the vindication they represented. What mattered wasn't that Theodore had finally recognized my value. It was that I had recognized it myself. enough to walk away from a situation where that value was constrained rather than celebrated. My intercom buzzed, Elena's voice coming through. "Your 3 o'clock is here. The leadership team for the quarterly strategic review." "Send them in," I replied, gathering my notes and focusing on the future we were building at Nexus. A future where knowing my place meant recognizing my own worth and finding an environment that valued it accordingly. As the team filed in, greeting each other with the easy camaraderie that characterized Nexus's culture, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Theodore had told me to know my place, never imagining that my place would be far beyond the limitations he had tried to impose, in a role where I could truly thrive, creating systems and leading teams with the full support of an organization that recognized talent as its most valuable asset. Sometimes I reflected as the meeting began, the most powerful step in your career isn't climbing higher on someone else's ladder. It's building your own. 1 year to the day since I had walked away from Meridian Technologies, I stood at the podium of the International Operations Management Conference, looking out at an audience of industry leaders, innovators, and rising stars. The journey from being told to know my place to delivering the keynote address at the industry's most prestigious gathering had been extraordinary, filled with challenges, triumphs, and profound personal growth. "Transformative operations isn't just about efficiency metrics," I said, my voice carrying confidently through the state-of-the-art conference hall. "It's about creating systems where human potential and technological innovation amplify each other, where people aren't constrained by hierarchies, but empowered by purpose." From my vantage point on stage, I could see Michael in the front row, nodding appreciatively. Beside him sat Elena, now our Vice President of Global Logistics, and Arjun, our CTO, with whom I had developed the adaptive prediction system that had revolutionized our industry approach. In just 1 year, our collaboration had produced technological innovations that larger companies with 10 times our resources had failed to conceive. At Nexus, I continued, advancing to the next slide displaying our remarkable growth trajectory. We've discovered that when you remove artificial limitations, when you value contribution over position, innovation over tradition, extraordinary things happen. The data spoke for itself. Nexus had rocketed from a promising startup to the second-largest integration platform provider in the market, our operational excellence driving exponential client acquisition and unprecedented retention rates. More telling than the revenue figures, however, was our talent retention. In an industry plagued by high turnover, Nexus boasted a 97% retention rate among key personnel. "People stay where they're valued," I explained, making eye contact with various audience members. "They innovate where they're empowered. They exceed expectations when those expectations aren't artificial ceilings, but genuine challenges." As I concluded my presentation to enthusiastic applause, I couldn't help but reflect on the remarkable series of events that had led to this moment. Events that had unfolded in the months following my enlightening lunch with Theodore and my limited consultation with James. The questions from the audience were insightful, focused on both the technological systems we had developed and the organizational culture that had enabled such rapid innovation. After addressing the final query, I stepped down from the stage to join Michael and our team. "Knocked it out of the park," Michael said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Though I'm not surprised. The Nexus approach sells itself when you have the metrics to back it up." Elena nodded her agreement. "I counted at least 4 competitors taking furious notes during your systems integration breakdown. They'll be studying that slide deck for months." "Let them," I laughed. By the time they implement what we presented today, we'll be 3 iterations ahead. As we moved toward the networking reception, a tall figure stepped into our path. James Harrington, no longer Director of Operations at Meridian, but now heading up the operational division at Stellar Systems, a mid-sized competitor that had been making strategic moves in the market. "David," he greeted me warmly, extending his hand. "Remarkable presentation. You've built something truly impressive at Nexus." "James," I replied, genuinely pleased to see him. "I heard about your move to Stellar. Congratulations." After our consultation sessions following Meridian's operational crisis, James and I had developed a surprisingly cordial professional relationship. He had been one of the few at Meridian who had acknowledged the systemic issues truthfully rather than politically, a quality I respected. "Best decision I ever made," James confirmed, a new confidence evident in his bearing. After seeing how Meridian operated, or rather, didn't operate, it became clear I needed an environment where I could actually make improvements, not just manage decline. Michael and Elena excused themselves to greet other contacts, leaving James and me to catch up. "I've been following Nexus's rise with interest," James continued. "Your adaptive prediction system is revolutionary. I'm implementing a modified version at Stellar, with full attribution to your framework, of course." "I appreciate that," I said. "How's Theodore handling Meridian's adjustment?" I chose my words carefully, though the industry was, well, aware of Meridian's significant market position losses over the past year. James's expression turned wry. "Actually, that's part of why I wanted to speak with you. Theodore's out." The news, while not entirely surprising given Meridian's trajectory, still landed with impact. "The board finally acted?" 3 months ago, James confirmed. After the Q3 numbers showed a 40% drop in client retention and the Evans Group withdrew their 8-figure contract. The interim CEO is Vanessa Chen. You might remember her from the Asia-Pacific division. I nodded. Vanessa had been one of the few executives at Meridian I genuinely respected. Brilliant, principled, and remarkably free of the political maneuvering that characterized much of the leadership team. "She's been reaching out to former Meridian talent," James continued, his tone growing more significant. "Trying to rebuild what was lost during Theodore's final months." I raised an eyebrow, immediately understanding the implication. "Including me, I take it?" James smiled. She asked me to mention that she'd welcome a conversation if you're open to it. No pressure, just professional courtesy. A year ago, such an overture might have provided a certain vindication, proof that my value had finally been recognized by the company that had once dismissed it. Now, it was merely an interesting footnote in a journey that had carried me far, beyond anything I could have achieved at Meridian. "I appreciate Vanessa thinking of me," I said sincerely, "but Nexus isn't just where I work. It's where I belong. There's nothing Meridian could offer that would compare to what we're building here." James nodded, unsurprised. I suspected as much, but promised I'd extend the invitation. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice walking away. Some environments simply can't value certain kinds of talent, not because the talent isn't extraordinary, but because the system isn't designed to recognize it." His insight struck me as remarkably perceptive, a hard-earned wisdom that likely stemmed from his own experiences at Meridian after my departure. "What about you?" I asked. "You seem to have landed well at Stellar." "Better than well," he confirmed. "I'm implementing many of the integrated approaches I learned from reviewing your systems. but in an environment that actually supports innovation. It's been liberating. As we exchanged business cards and promised to stay in touch, I was struck by how completely my perspective had shifted. A year ago, I had viewed James as a symbol of the injustice I had experienced, the outsider who had been handed what I had earned. Now, I recognized him as simply another talented professional seeking an environment where his contributions would be valued. The rest of the conference unfolded as a testament to Nexus's rising influence in the industry. Our booth was consistently crowded with potential clients, partners, and even prospective employees drawn by our reputation for innovation and our people-first operational approach. I delivered 2 additional workshop sessions on our adaptive systems, both standing room only, despite being scheduled in the largest available conference rooms. On the final evening, as I prepared for the closing gala dinner, my phone buzzed with a notification that gave me pause. An incoming email from Vanessa Chen, Meridian's interim CEO. Subject: Congratulations and an opportunity. David, your keynote. Address was truly outstanding, a perfect balance of technical insight and visionary leadership. Nexus's growth under your operational guidance has been nothing short of remarkable. While James likely mentioned my interest in connecting, I wanted to reach out personally. Meridian is undergoing a complete organizational transformation following Theodore's departure. The board has recognized the critical mistakes made in talent valuation and retention, particularly in your case. I'm building a new leadership team committed to genuine innovation and meritocratic advancement. I believe your expertise would be invaluable in this rebuilding process, and am prepared to offer you the position of Chief Innovation Officer, reporting directly to me, with full autonomy over operational systems and structure. This would, of course, include significant equity and compensation reflective of your market value and proven impact. I understand your commitment to Nexus, and that this overture may be unwelcome. However, I would be remiss not to at least extend the opportunity to discuss how you might shape Meridian's future, should that be of interest. Regardless of your decision, I wish you continued success. Your work is transforming our industry for the better. Warmest regards, Vanessa Chen, Interim CEO, Meridian Technologies. I read the email twice, struck by its tone of genuine respect and recognition, so different from Theodore's grudging acknowledgement over lunch a year ago. The offer itself was substantial, far exceeding the global director position Theodore had proposed, both in scope and in reporting structure. There was a time when such validation from Meridian would have meant everything to me, when being recognized by the very organization that had once diminished my value would have felt like the ultimate vindication. But that time had passed. I drafted a respectful reply, expressing appreciation for her recognition and graciously declining the opportunity. Meridian wasn't where my future lay, not because I harbored resentment for past treatment, but because Nexus had become the canvas on which I was painting a far more meaningful professional legacy. As I finished the email, a knock at my hotel room door announced Michael's arrival for our pre-gala meeting. We had agreed to connect briefly to review our objectives for the evening, specifically our planned discussions with 3 major potential clients who had expressed serious interest following my keynote. Ready for the victory lap? Michael asked as I let him in, his characteristic energy undiminished despite the long conference days. Just finishing up some correspondence, I replied, sending the email to Vanessa before turning my attention to our planning. Michael glanced at my phone. Anything interesting? I hesitated briefly before deciding on transparency. Vanessa Chen just offered me the position of Chief Innovation Officer at Meridian. Full autonomy, equity, the works. Michael's eyebrows shot up. That's quite an overture. How do you feel about it? The question was typical of Michael's leadership style, focused on my perspective rather than immediately asserting his own interests or concerns. Flattered, I admitted, but not tempted. A year ago, it might have been different. Now it feels like being asked to go backward when we're making such remarkable progress forward. Michael nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. You know, when I recruited you, I saw potential that Theodore and Meridian had completely missed. But even I couldn't have predicted how transformative your leadership would be for Nexus. He settled into one of the room's armchairs, his expression turning contemplative. The board meeting next week. I was going to wait until after the conference to discuss this, but now seems appropriate. We're creating a new position, President of Nexus Operations Group. I looked at him with surprise. A separate operational division? More than that, Michael clarified. A semi-autonomous business unit focused on your integrated operational frameworks, with its own P&L and equity structure. The adaptive systems you've built have applications far beyond our current market: healthcare, manufacturing, even government services. He leaned forward, his excitement palpable. I'm proposing that you lead this new entity, with an equity stake that reflects your role in its creation and future growth. Not just a title change, David. Partial ownership of something with extraordinary potential. The offer took me by surprise, not just its scope, but its timing coming immediately after Vanessa's email. That's significantly more than I expected, Michael. It's significantly less than you've earned, he countered firmly. This isn't about retention in the face of Meridian's offer. This has been in development for months, based entirely on what you've already built, and what I believe you're capable of building in the future. As we discussed the details of the proposed structure, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary distance I had traveled, not just professionally, but psychologically, since that fateful night when Theodore had told me to know my place. The gala dinner that evening felt like a celebration of not just Nexus's achievements, but of a personal journey that had transformed my understanding of professional value and purpose. As promised, we connected with our prospective clients, each conversation reinforcing the growing recognition of our approach within the industry. It was near the end of the evening when I encountered a face from the past that I hadn't expected to see. Theodore Montgomery himself, standing somewhat awkwardly at the periphery of the main networking area. He looked markedly different from our lunch a year ago, less commanding, more hesitant, his customary confidence replaced by a careful watchfulness. Part of me considered avoiding the interaction altogether, but a stronger impulse, curiosity mixed with a strange sense of completion, led me to approach him. Theodore, I greeted him with professional courtesy. I'm surprised to see you here. He straightened slightly at my approach, his expression difficult to read. David, congratulations on your keynote. It was illuminating. Thank you, I replied, wondering what circumstances had brought him to the conference following his departure from Meridian. As if reading my thoughts, he explained, I'm consulting now, helping companies navigate operational transitions. There was a hint of irony in his tone, suggesting he recognized the incongruity of his new role given Meridian's operational collapse under his leadership. How's that going? I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective after such a significant professional setback. Theodore hesitated, seeming to weigh his response carefully. "It's been a learning experience," he finally said, the admission clearly difficult for him. "Seeing operations from the outside, it provides a different perspective." I nodded, suspecting there was much more beneath this surface acknowledgement. "Your presentation today," he continued after a moment, "about systems that value human potential rather than constraining it, it was particularly resonant. The acknowledgement, however oblique, of the fundamental disconnect that had defined our professional relationship at Meridian was unexpected." "Nexus's approach is working," I replied simply. "The results speak for themselves." Theodore nodded, a complex emotion crossing his features. "They do indeed." He paused, then added with evident difficulty, "I was wrong, David." The words hung between us, significant in their rarity coming from Theodore Montgomery. "About many things," he continued, "but particularly about your place. When I told you to know your place, I fundamentally misunderstood what that place was, what it could be." The admission was clearly costing him. Theodore had built his career on being decisively, unwaveringly right, even when evidence suggested otherwise. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, genuinely appreciating the acknowledgement even though I no longer needed it. "For what it's worth, you weren't entirely wrong." He looked at me with surprise. "I did need to know my place," I explained, "just not in the way you meant it. Not as a limitation, but as a recognition of where my talents could truly flourish. Sometimes finding your place means leaving where you are." Theodore absorbed this, nodding slowly. "Meridian lost more than operational expertise when you left. We lost perspective, the ability to see talent for what it is, rather than where it fits in a predetermined structure." As we parted ways with a handshake that felt like the closing of a significant chapter, I was struck by how completely my feelings had transformed. Where there might once have been satisfaction in Theodore's professional downfall, now there was only a quiet appreciation for the journey that his misjudgment had ultimately launched. The final day of the conference brought a flurry of follow-up meetings, credential exchanges, and final networking connections. As our team prepared to depart, the conference organizer approached with an unexpected request, an invitation to chair next year's event, a recognition typically reserved for industry veterans with decades of leadership experience. "The feedback from your keynote was unprecedented," she explained. "You've articulated a vision for operational leadership that's resonating across sectors. We'd be honored to have you shape next year's program." As we boarded the private jet that would return us to headquarters, a recent acquisition reflecting Nexus's remarkable growth, Elena settled into the seat beside me, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about that first night," she said, "when you told me you had resigned. Remember what you said when I asked what you would do?" I smiled at the memory. I believe I said I didn't know yet, but that I wasn't sticking around to be anyone's right-hand man. "And now look at you," Elena said, gesturing to encompass our current circumstances, the private jet, the successful conference, the impending leadership of a new business division. President of Nexus Operations Group, a far cry from right hand. Nah. Her observation captured the extraordinary transformation of the past year, but missed something more fundamental. "The title is nice," I acknowledged, "but it's not what matters most." "What does?" she asked curiously. I considered the question seriously, reflecting on all that had transpired since that pivotal moment when Theodore had told me to know my place. Building something meaningful, I finally said. Creating systems that elevate people rather than constraining them. Working somewhere my contributions are valued not just when they're at risk of being lost, but from day one. Elena nodded her understanding. Finding your true place. Exactly, I agreed. And helping others find theirs. As the jet accelerated down the runway, lifting us smoothly into the clear blue sky, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. Not just the professional milestones, but the profound shift in how I understood my own value. Theodore's dismissive command to know your place had inadvertently launched me into a future far beyond what either of us could have imagined. Sometimes, I reflected as we soared above the clouds, the most limiting constraints we face aren't external systems or hierarchies, but our own willingness to accept the places others assign to us. True growth begins when we recognize that our place isn't a fixed position in someone else's structure, but a dynamic space we create through the unique value we bring. The meeting with the Nexus board the following week formalized my new role as president of Nexus Operations Group, complete with the equity stake Michael had outlined. The presentation of our 5-year growth strategy was met with unanimous approval, setting in motion the expansion that would ultimately establish our operational frameworks as industry standards across multiple sectors. 6 months later, as I stood on the balcony of our new headquarters, a striking architectural statement that physically embodied our integrated approach, with floors designed around collaboration rather than hierarchy, I spotted a familiar face among the new hires. Touring the facility, Sarah Miller had been a promising analyst on my team at Meridian, someone whose innovative thinking had often been sidelined by Theodore's rigid adherence to established protocols. Seeing her among our new cohort filled me with a particular satisfaction. Later that afternoon, as I welcomed the incoming team members, Sarah approached with a hint of her old hesitancy. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me," she began. "Of course I do," I assured her. "Your analysis of the supply chain vulnerabilities was years ahead of its time. I tried 3 times to get Theodore to implement your recommendations." She smiled, surprised by my recollection of those specific details. "That's actually why I applied to Nexus. I saw your keynote at the IOMC about creating systems where human potential and technological innovation amplify each other. It sounded like the environment I've been looking for." Her words resonated with my own journey, reminding me why the transformation of the past year mattered beyond my personal vindication or success. "That's exactly what we're building here," I told her. "A place where your best ideas aren't just heard, but actively developed. Where your place is determined by your contribution, not your position on an org chart." As Sarah joined her orientation group, I returned to my office to prepare for an upcoming strategic partnership announcement. On my desk sat the latest industry analysis showing Nexus Operations Group now leading the sector in both innovation and client satisfaction, with Meridian continuing its steady decline despite Vanessa's best efforts to reverse course. But the report that truly captured the essence of our achievement wasn't the market share analysis or the revenue projections. It was the employee satisfaction survey showing Nexus ranking first in talent retention, professional development, and organizational trust. We hadn't just built better systems, we had created a better place for people to do their best work. Later that week, as I delivered a presentation to our expanded leadership team on our vision for the coming year, I included a slide that had become something of a personal mantra. Your place is not a position assigned to you. It's a space you create through the unique value you bring. The principle that had emerged from my own journey had become a cornerstone of our organizational philosophy. A reminder that true leadership isn't about telling others to know their place, but about creating environments where everyone can discover and expand the full potential of their contribution. Theodore's dismissive words, meant to limit my ambitions and contain my potential, had instead catalyzed a transformation that extended far beyond my individual career. They had launched me on a path to becoming not just a more successful professional, but a more visionary leader committed to building systems where others would never have to be told to know their place because they would be empowered to create their own. Sometimes I reflected as I concluded my presentation to enthusiastic applause, the most powerful catalyst for growth isn't success, but the sting of being undervalued. And sometimes the greatest professional achievement isn't climbing higher, on someone else's ladder, but building an entirely new structure where ladders are replaced by platforms that lift everyone who contributes meaningfully. Theodore had told me to know my place. He couldn't have imagined that my place would ultimately be creating a whole new paradigm for what place could mean, not just for me, but for an entire organization, and potentially an industry. As I looked out at the diverse, talented team that had assembled around our shared vision, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. Theodore's limitation had become my liberation. His command to know my place had set me free to discover that my true place was far beyond anything he, or even I, could have imagined. And that discovery had made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us!